Hey everybody, my name is Cameron Dava, and for my final presentation, we're going to be looking at horror done right in video games. Horror as a genre has evolved rapidly over the course of video game history. The methods and techniques used by game devs to scare the shit out of players has been constantly evolving throughout the process. These are specifically engineered games that the sole intent is to scare the player through a variety of means. How the game does this, or how they go about doing so, is what makes one stand out amongst the crowd. To better understand how game devs approach horror, I wanted to break it up into different elements and styles utilized throughout the numerous different titles. To kick this off, let's look at jump scares. Arguably the most famous aspect of the horror genre in both film and video games, jump scares are an essential part of the horror genre. They're the fastest way to get a scared reaction from your audience, and can be a very useful tool for keeping the player in check within the limitations of the game. But, in my opinion, a game that relies solely on this mechanic to make it a horror game is pretty lazy. Honestly, jump scares, when used in this way, are cheap memes of fooling the audience into believing the game has more depth than it really does. This is why both film and games that use this method are never quite as scary on a second playthrough or a second watching. That being said, there are plenty of examples of games that, in my opinion, correctly use jump scares. Games such as Subnautica, for example, use jump scares to keep the player in a constant state of vigilance. Unlike more linear games that use the exact same scripted cinematics with each playthrough, Subnautica's events and jump scares are random. The idea of a Reaper Leviathan just out of sight is something that's always haunting the player, and it paralyzes you metaphorically by making you reconsider something as simple as swimming over to grab a piece of titanium from the ground. Because there's always that possibility that if you go anywhere near that, you'll have to deal with, well, this.
Alright, time to go. Alright. Lost the Titan. Lost the little T. Guess we'll see the Cyclops from here. Oh my god! Oh Jesus! Oh, it's got me! No, get off! No, I ain't losing this as well. Screw you! Oh, is it following me? I don't know if he followed me. Oh my god. Oh, that gave me a heart attack.
This is when jump scares work. They're not the main attraction to the game, but instead they're the punishment for making a bad decision. I'm okay with games scaring me for that, but in games such as this, when the jump scares both serve no purpose to the game and they have no relevance to the actual gaming experience, that gets me upset. It's just lazy game design, and there's so much more that you could do to create an actual scary experience, not just a startling one. Spooky's House of Jump Scares, on the other hand, is the exception. On one hand, the jump scares are uninspired, pointless, and just downright stupid as a game mechanic. But they're also genius. Now, okay, before you call me a hypocrite and tie me to a pyre, let me explain. Spooky's House of Jump Scares starts off as a dumb, cartoony game with cheap, carnival-style jump scares. They're so consistent throughout the beginning of the game that eventually you become so numb to them that they almost don't exist to you, and they're really just kind of a minor irritation. The game knows this, though, and eventually it switches to this. It's a sudden change in atmosphere that's far more creepy than the previous cartoony scares you've been experiencing up until this point. Additionally, the game adds new terrifying monsters, game mechanics, and it forces the player to pull all of their focus onto this new horrifying gameplay. But that's how they get you. You've become so numb to the pop-up cartoons that you almost completely ignore them, And now all of your focus is suddenly shifted to this new thing, and you're left completely vulnerable to...
Alright,
Someone just tripped.
Jesus! It was already there.
I bet no one has been scared like
No
that.
one.
When
No
we
one.
missed it and then got re-scared
That
on it.
was horrifying.
My god. This segues me perfectly into the next horror trope, which is the subversion of expectations. There are plenty of games out there which I wouldn't necessarily consider to be horror games, but they still use this mechanic as a wonderful tool to create unease and discomfort from the players. Some examples of subversion can be seen in games such as Doki Doki Literature Club. Oh boy, there's a lot we can talk about with Doki Doki Literature Club! But because of time restraints, I'm just going to focus on one major part of the game. Of course, spoiler warnings, if you haven't played this game and you would like to, I'm about to spoil the biggest twist in the game. I'll give you a few seconds to click away. No, I'm serious. Look, it's a really good game. It's worth the play. Trust me, throughout the first playthrough, the game appears to be this fun, charming dating sim game that's not all that exciting. You write poems, you engage with the other club members, and you follow this wacky story written out by Team Salvato. There are a few times where the game subtly hints that there might be some slightly darker themes, but nothing ever goes too far or it ever gets very serious. Until, of course, the game takes a full 180 and you experience, well, this.
Sayori? Wake up, dummy! There's no response. I really didn't want to have to enter her room like this. Isn't it kind of a breach of privacy? But she really leaves me no choice. I gently open the door. Sit.
What? What? Are you fucking serious?
Yeah.
What? No fucking what? Oh my god, is this a horror game?
I don't know, Dan.
Are you serious?
What the hell? What the hell? Is this a nightmare? It has to be. This isn't real.
Oh my god.
There's no way this can be real. Sayori wouldn't do this. Everything was normal up until a few days ago. That's why I can't believe what
This
my
is
eyes
what
are showing
happens
me.
in Doki Doki Literature Club?
If you go into this game completely blind to the plot, this is a world-shattering twist, and from here, the game goes completely off the deep end. It's a brilliant use of subversion, though, because never in a million years would I have thought that this could go to this. It's brilliant. Next, I want to talk about atmosphere and how it plays into the horror genre. In my humble opinion, when done right, this is the most impressive way to convey horror. And to better understand that, I want to explain what makes a horror video game different from a horror film. In a horror film, you really just sit back and take it in. When you watch somebody doing something stupid, you can really just sit back in your chair and yell at them for being an idiot. You can disconnect and simply experience the roller coaster. But in a video game, you're the idiot. This immediately forces the player into a situation where suddenly it's no longer, why aren't you running away? It's, oh, why am I not running away? But of course, it takes more than plot alone to establish a horror scenario. Take Among Us, for example. The idea of there being an alien amongst your friends that can perfectly disguise themselves and kill you at any given moment is terrifying. So why isn't this? The game's set up in a very cartoony style, and there's no real scary elements to the game. Now, let's take that exact same scenario and put it into a game that properly utilizes atmosphere. That's a million times more terrifying. So what's being done differently here? First and foremost, the art style has a far creepier appearance to it. Everything from the lighting to the modeling and the claustrophobic layout is designed in such a way to make you feel as if you have no control over the situation. Additionally, the sound design gives the player a real sense of scale. The station you're in is massive, and every inch of it seems to be covered with air ducts. They're in the walls, they're above your head, they're under the floorboards, and that of course means that the alien could be anywhere around you, and it makes you feel completely powerless. Wait, but in Among Us, you can't fight back against the alien either. Well, yes, but there's a real difference between this and this. Lastly, I want to talk about horror through game mechanics. Due to the fact that in video games, someone is forced to be the player, there are a number of different tricks devs use to pull more terror from situations that are only possible through the medium of gaming. Take the original Resident Evil, for instance. The game utilizes a forced camera position throughout its entirety. While this might seem limiting to gamers more accustomed to, say, first-person shooters, it allows for a lot of possible tension in the world of horror. Suddenly, doing something as simple as crossing a room has an added weight to it, because whatever you do, you won't know what's around the corner until you've already rounded it. This comes in handy for numerous scary moments throughout the game, and it adds to the overall cinematography by always ensuring that the player is seeing what the game devs intended for them to see. Another example within Resident Evil comes from the second installment of the game, Resident Evil 2. In the game, there's a number of save rooms located throughout the map. What sets these rooms aside is that the player knows these rooms are safe, for a number of reasons. The first being that the typewriter is present. This is the means in which the player can save the game. And the other is that there's a distinct song that's always playing upon entering these rooms. Additionally, within these rooms, the zombies in the game can't break in and attack the player. This gives the player some much needed comfort from the usual hectic terror that they're typically exposed to. Halfway through the game, however, the introduction of a character called Mr. X arrives. He's this unstoppable force that's impervious to all damage, and once he's introduced to the player, he will never stop hunting you. I mean this literally, in the sense that at all times, his model is somewhere on the map, slowly stammering his way towards the player. While of course Mr. X can be outrun or outmaneuvered, it's still horrifying when you're trying to work through a puzzle in the game, and then suddenly you hear this slow crescendo of his footsteps getting closer. But the game takes this a step further, just to really mess with the player. The main save room in the first building is no longer safe. Mr. X has the ability to kick down the doors to the main hall and attack the player in the safe room. In the safe room! This is just cruel, because up until this point, this was meant to be your escape from the horrors of the game. But now, there's literally nowhere you can hide from Mr. X. Of course, there are many, many, many more examples of great horror games out there, and the strategies behind what makes them terrifying. But for now, I'm going to end my TED Talk here. So hopefully, in at least one way, this helped you to look at the horror genre in a way that maybe you previously hadn't, or maybe if you're an individual who doesn't particularly like scary games, I hope this helped to convince you that maybe it is worth giving them another shot. Unless it's PT. Fuck that game.